Macbeth 4-1. I'm doing it over and over again. Good morning and welcome. We are in Senior English A, and our objective for the hour is to work with Macbeth 4-1. Let's just review where we've been. Macbeth is a play about the acquisition of power, the quest for power. But notice that with each acquisition comes a loss. I would put it in my notes that way. With each acquisition comes a loss. We also obviously have got to play the game that Mr. Keeley was taking us towards at the very beginning of our conversation, and that is who's to blame. The blame game becomes really clear by 4-1. In Macbeth, we've had and seen a great and mighty warrior who allows himself to be tempted into taking the life of the king, then of course the life of 2 bodyguards, and finally the life and supposed life of his best friend and his best friend's son. In the process of of Macbeth's decline, we can as well watch his wife's, Lady Macbeth's, decline as she begins the process, the long, dark night that will ultimately end an act later in Act 5. Okay, so you might put that in your notes as well. Lady Macbeth, we will see in Act 5, begin her final denouement, end. And it will be tragic. This is, of course, called a tragedy because we look at a great and mighty warrior in Macbeth who begins with great and tremendous power and honor, and by the end of the play, he is nothing more than what he has been called already in Act 3 at the very end, a tyrant. That is to say, a man who cares, as he said about himself. I'm going to go to the witches. I do not care about anyone, he says, other than myself. We use that N-word, narcissism. And now we come back to it. Notice that there's some recapitulation or some repeating of patterns of Shakespeare's play. Notice in 1-1 we begin with witches, right? In 1-3 we begin with witches. We've just finished in the 3rd act with that whole scene with Hecate and those witches that maybe was kind of joined in. Now in 4-1 we'll start with witches again. These witches are going to set the mood. They will talk about how they've been out doing nasties for different kinds of people, creating all kinds of nasties, when onto the stage on page 394 will come Hamlet, and he comes on one side, and Macbeth, on one side, and on the other side are the 3 witches, and one of the 3 witches will say, "By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes." Put in your notes, what is being suggested? That nasty witches who have been out doing all kinds of nasty things to other people, they say, at least we're not as bad as Macbeth. I mean, what does that tell you? Okay, Macbeth is seen as wicked by wicked witches. Okay, so that's how bad Macbeth is by this point. Why is Macbeth here, by the way? He wants to know the future. This is nothing more than, I want to know the future. Now, why would he care so much about the future? Dude, he's king. I don't understand. It's not so much being king, it's staying king, right? And why is he worried about that? You're right. There was that prophecy that was made to Banquo about you won't be king, but your sons will be kings, which will obviously raise the concern for Macbeth. He will ask the 3 witches about the future. The 3 witches then of 4-1 will give 3 famous prophecies. I want to walk through them with you real quickly so that when we hear them, you'll understand. So you'll want to write these down in your notes as prophecies 1, 2, and 3 of Act 4, Scene 1. Really, technically, there are 4 prophecies, not 3. But we begin with the 3, and then finally we'll get to the 4th. Ironically, the 4th will be the one that Macbeth is most interested in, okay? But first, the very first, what is often referred to in the folio as an apparition or a ghost. Out of a cauldron will come 3 apparitions, okay, as we will look at them. And you will see these starting on page 395 as we see the first apparition on page 395. And this one is often referred to as an armed head. Now, what this simply means is a warrior with a helmet on, okay, a warrior with a helmet on. And the first prophecy will be simply, beware Macduff. Beware the Thane of Fife. Now, Macbeth, when he hears this, immediately will say, I knew it. I knew that Macduff guy was somebody I needed to be worried about. I'm going to have him killed. The second prophecy will come, a fairly disturbing scene prop, will come from a bloodied infant. An infant with blood all over it. Again, Shakespeare would have props for this. And the infant will come out of the cauldron, and the infant will say, you don't ever have to be afraid about dying, because no person ever born of a woman can harm you. That's the prophecy. You will never be harmed by anyone born of a woman. Macbeth will take great comfort in this. At first he will say, well, let's let Macduff live. And then he says, well, let's just jack him anyway. Remember, by this point, Macbeth is a serial killer, so he's going to do it anyway, right? Okay? The third prophecy is a strange one. It is a child who comes up out of the cauldron. And he says a very strange prediction that, unless you've kind of studied this play, doesn't make much sense. This is the one place last fall when you watched this play that it was a little confusing for a number of students as I was speaking with them afterwards. If they didn't know this play, they did not understand, first of all, the prophecy, and then later the fulfilling of the prophecy. The prophecy is this: you never have to worry about losing your kingdom. Remember, he's worried about the future, right? You never have to worry about the kingdom until the trees of Birnam Wood march up the hill of Dunsinane. Now, this doesn't mean anything to you unless you know something about the topography of Inverness. By the way, you can still visit this famous castle in Scotland, okay? In Scotland, all over North England and Scotland, they built their castles, and they're pretty amazing structures. I mean, when you visit them today, you're pretty blown away. They've lasted for a long time. But they always built them on hills. All right, pardon my lack of artwork. At the very top of the hill is where they would build the castle. Okay? Inverness is the castle where Macbeth is. Okay? This hill is called Dunsinane Hill. Okay? That's the hill that it's built upon. And then there's at the bottom of the hill a large forest called Birnam Wood. Okay? This forest, we are told, will get up and march up the hill to the castle. And until the trees jump out the ground, you don't have to worry. And immediately Macbeth is like, well, that can never be. Obviously, right? He says that can never be. Trees, obviously, don't jump up out of the ground and go marching up hills to castles. So, all right. So he's got his three prophecies for one. And all three of the prophecies, well, let's just say it out loud. They kind of make it look good for Macbeth. I mean, that first prophecy about being aware of Macduff, that was a concern. But the second prophecy of no man born of a woman can harm you, that gave him some comfort. And then this one about the trees marching up the hill, that gives him total comfort. He's like, dude, that will never be. I'm good to go. The witches are ready to leave. They feel like they've done their job. Macbeth is not done. Macbeth came for one real reason. He wants to know about, can I secure my kingdom? And being a king, I need to know about this thing with Banquo. The witches will tell him, don't ask. You don't want to know the answer to this question. Macbeth says, I do want to know the answer to this question. And so the witches will show him the future. Now, this showing of the future thing is done really interestingly. There's a mirror that's held up, and a group of men will walk on stage in kind of like a circle where they go on stage, off stage, on stage, off stage, to show a line or a succession. All of these guys are dressed like kings. And Macbeth will immediately say that they look like Banquo. Okay? They look like they favor Banquo. In other words, what is this portending or predicting? Yeah, Fleance got away, and Fleance is going to grow up to be a king, and then he's going to have kings. And interestingly, the last one that comes on even is double-sceptered. Now, what does that mean? Macbeth points this out. He's like, the last king comes on stage double-sceptered. Now, what is a scepter? Do you remember? Yeah, it's this stupid little stick that kings would hold that give them the right to rule, right? What does it mean if they have double scepters? What does that mean? They don't just rule one kingdom, they rule two kingdoms. Whoa, so they got serious power. And the last one that comes on is double scepter. Now, we should point out in your notes, this is a really important political moment for Shakespeare. It's kind of one of the most important moments of Shakespeare's life. Here's why. When Shakespeare begins to write, a woman is sitting on the throne. Her name is Queen Elizabeth, and she is a remarkable queen. She arguably is the greatest ruler in the history of the world. There are people who have made that argument. You can make that argument pretty well. I mean, think about it. At the age of 18, she comes to power and runs the entire known world. And she does a bang-up job of running the world. I mean, she does some pretty remarkable things. One of the first things she does is to require that all of her citizens have at least an 8th grade education, which doesn't sound like a big dog deal until you do the statistics work and you realize nobody in England can read up other than the upper class. It's Elizabeth who figures, and she was right about this, if everybody in England can read, you can disseminate information to them. It's a way to make sure that they're all on the same page with me. So she educates everybody. She does a lot of these kinds of reforms. It's quite a remarkable woman. But there's a problem for Elizabeth. As she gets older, she never marries. She's in fact dies called the Virgin Queen. Whether she actually dies a virgin or not is a subject of huge debate. Most people think she took lovers, but she would never become a wife. The reason is simple. She liked the power she held as queen, but she'd use it all the time. Guys from other countries would come to court her, and she would say, yeah, I think I'll marry you, but first you have to do A, B, and C for me. They would do it on the expectation she would marry, and then she would change her mind, as someone once said a woman is sometimes allowed to do. And she did this game all the way through her tenure. The only problem is she's getting older. As she gets older, she starts to want to look younger. One of the things she does is to take eggshell and stick it to her face. So she puts this white eggshell all over her face because she thinks like the white of the eggshell makes her look younger because it makes her look paler or whiter or whatever. And so this is why when you see pictures of Elizabeth from her later days, portraits, there's lines. You maybe thought that was because it was an old photograph. No, this is because when she talked, she had to talk like this because if she opened her mouth at all or she smiled, it would start to crack. And then they'd stick more of this stuff on, you see, like this kind of thing. Of course, everybody around her had to tell her how beautiful she was or she'd chop off your head. Just ask Sir Walter Raleigh about that. Sooner or later, if you don't go along with Queen Elizabeth, she jacks you. The only problem is, though, remember, how do you become king or queen? Your mama, your daddy had to be king, queen, royalty, right? The problem for Elizabeth is she's getting older. She's not getting married, which means she has no heir. She's got no son, no one to step into the throne. And as she gets really old, she still is not naming anyone to the throne. Obviously, she's no longer capable of having a child and therefore having a direct descendant to the throne. But the question then becomes, who's going to be the next ruler of England? Elizabeth has created this unbelievable empire with all of this tremendous strength, but now she's ready to die. And all around Elizabeth are all kinds of factions that are building up. So that the minute that she dies, she's aware there's going to be civil war in England, where everybody's going to be fighting for power. One of her dying wishes, when she's ready to go, is to name to the throne. Everyone leans into the bed to hear her. She names to the throne James the First, King of Scotland. Now, for those of you that know your Braveheart movie, you already know a little bit about how England and Scotland get along. I'll give you a hint. It ain't pretty. And when she names James the First of Scotland to the throne of England, what a brilliant woman. I mean, I've heard men say women can never be president because they can't run the world the way men can. Queen Elizabeth speaks from the grave and says, au contraire. Even in her dying wish, this woman is genius. She names the one guy everybody in England can hate. And they do. And in that moment, she unites all of England. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. James I comes to the throne. He kind of looks with disdain on the English people. All of the English people are united. Civil war averted. Smart gal, right? Right to the very end. Queen Elizabeth is a pretty shrewd ruler. James I has an interest in the theater, as did Queen Elizabeth. He is invited to the first showing of the play Macbeth by a young playwright named Shakespeare. James I is from Scotland. He was very much into his own history of his family. 5 or 6 generations earlier, James I had had a really important man in his life in the history books. And that man's name was? Banquo. Right? Now, when Shakespeare writes this play, normal people don't know this. There's in fact only one cat in the audience that knows this, other than Shakespeare himself, and of course it's the King of England. Macbeth, or Shakespeare, is one smart cookie, right? Of course, after the play, James I has to have a little conversation with Shakespeare about the fact that if you'll think about it, you just finished writing this for this paper of today. Who is the real man of this play? It isn't Macbeth, is it? It isn't Duncan. It isn't even Macduff, really. The real man of the play is, yeah, it is, isn't it, right? Okay, it's Banquo. It's this man who is honorable all the way to the very end of his life, saving his son by sacrificing his own life so that Fleance can go on to become kings. In this moment, James I will witness, ah yes, I am lineage to the greatest man in the whole play. Banquo, that's me, that's my family. He will after this give tribute to Shakespeare, and for the rest of his life, Shakespeare's play company will be called the Chamberlain's Men after James I. He gets the bank that he needs to be able to continue to have the office of writing these plays. So Shakespeare is a smart, a shrewd politician in this moment, okay? And so this is going to be one more element. Of course, bad news for Macbeth. Yeah. Fleance got away, and yeah, he is going to make his way to the throne, which for Macbeth then will just make it that much worse. At the very end of 4-1, Macbeth will make some, I'm on 398, Macbeth will make some observations about those witches. First of all, they all have a tendency to go away right at the moment that he wants to have more conversation, and sure enough, they do. Away they go. Lennox will come onto the stage, and Macbeth will ask, did you see the witches? Macbeth at this point is no longer interested in even trying to pretend like he's not affiliated with evil and the witches. They're like, no, the weird sisters, no, can't see any of them. Macbeth says, infected, line 139 on page 398, infected be the air whereon they ride, and damned all those who trust them. Whoa, what does Macbeth just say? There's dark irony here. Believing in witches and their stupid prophecies will only lead you to be damned. What's Macbeth going to do? Turn around and believe in the prophecies of the witches. Right. We call this, by the way, for your notes, it to be dramatic or on-stage irony. In other words, it's a kind of irony that the audience on some level almost has to laugh at. Dude, are you even listening to the words you're saying? Macbeth says, anyone that believes in witches is a complete and utter fool. I believe in witches. You see how this kind of works. Then off they go, he will ask, was there somebody, a horse galloping by? And Lennox will say, well, yeah, it was Macduff. He's leaving for England. Macduff, of course, remember, is the subject of the first prophecy, right? Beware Macduff. Macbeth will say, fled to England, I, my good lord, and then we will finish with another aside. Take a look at this interesting aside at 4-1. Time, thou anticipates my dread exploits. Can you put it in your own words? What's he say here? This is the drats line, right? Drats, I wish I could have killed Macduff before he got away to England. The flighty purpose never is o'ertook unless the deed go with it. I should have killed him right when I thought about it. From this moment, this is a pivotal moment in our play. Macbeth has just been given his 4 prophecies. 3 of the 4 obviously give him some comfort. That 4th one troubles him. Look what he now says. It's as if he's going to flip a switch. From this moment, the very firstlings of my heart shall be the firstlings of my hand. Can you put that in your own words? You are now in 4-1 and you're reading Shakespeare's poetic prose. You ought to be able by this point to begin to put some of this in your own words. From this moment, he says, the very firstlings of my heart shall be the firstlings of my hand. Do you have any sense what that means?
Whatever I think he's going to
Whatever I think I want to do, I'm going to do it. Meaning what? What's he not going to do from this point on? I'm not going to think about it. Whatever comes into my brain, I don't like the way somebody looks, wham, I'm going to blow them away. I don't like the fact I didn't get pickles on my burger at Big Mac, wham, I'm going to start blowing people away. I got no interest in thought. I got no interest in logic or reason. I'm simply going to start bunging people. That's it. I'm done. Whoa. I'm not going to think about it anymore. Now, why would he say this? What's the problem with thinking about it? We'll pick this up when we study Hamlet. Why is thinking bad if you are a criminal?
Guilty.
Yeah, if you think about it, you might have a guilty conscience. It's in some ways true that Macbeth maybe here is trying to step away from the notion of guilty conscience. I'm no longer going to have a guilty conscience. I'm going to do whatever I want to do, and I don't care about what other people think. Whoa, which will lead us now, and even now, which will lead us now to the next thing he's going to do. And it's at this point, most audience members of Shakespeare's day would just go, whoa, 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 dude, you definitely have crossed the line. That whole thing of killing Banquo, crossing a line, no doubt. And Fleance, trying to kill Fleance, that's a major. But there's one thing Macbeth has not yet done that now he says he's going to do. And this is going to label him the worst of bad guys. Even in film today, if you want to make a really, really bad evil guy, villain in a movie, there's one thing that villain can do that will make almost any audience member of today go, whoa, 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 that's bad. What is it? Macbeth's about to say it. Take a look at what he says. And even now, to crown my thoughts with acts, be it thought and done. I'm done thinking about it. I'm just going to go do this. What is he going to do? The Castle of Macduff I will surprise. Seize up on Fife is the name of the castle. Give to the edge of the sword his wife, his babes, and all unfortunate souls that trace him in his line. Whoa! He's gonna completely slaughter all of the women and children in an undefended castle. Why is it undefended?
Because he left.
Macduff is left for England. Right? So he's going to now send in army, guys, and he's going to slaughter Macduff's wife, all of Macduff's kids, and basically anybody else that's along for the ride. Woo! Like I said, even in movies today, if you want to portray a really bad villain will kill women and children, especially completely innocent women and children. It's like Lady Macduff. His wife's going to have any clue what's going on. Keep reading. No boasting like a fool. This deed I'll do before this purpose cool. Right? But no more sights. What does that mean, no more sights? You got any sense what that means? From the very beginning, remember Macbeth suffers with these hallucinations, right? The first one was seeing the bloody dagger, right? The second was hearing the house say Macbeth has killed Sleep. The third was seeing the ghost of Banquo walking around at the party, right? Okay, he doesn't like these sights. Why not? What's wrong with these sights? What is it that it's keeping him from doing?
Sleeping.
He isn't sleeping. This is a sleep-deprived criminal, right? And he's driving himself nuts. We clearly are watching a mentally psychotic breakdown. And it's happening right on stage, right before our eyes. And then the end of the scene. I want to point out one other thing, though, before we listen to this scene. Just flip your eyes over to 399. And we're going to look at 4-2 in more detail. But look who comes on stage. Right? That's Lady Macduff comes on stage, right? Okay. And, are you ready for this? Her little boy. Her little boy's going to show up in this scene. Right? So, we already know what's about to happen to this poor babe. We know, don't we? Why do we know? Because Shakespeare has Macbeth tell us out loud, this is what I'm about to do. I'm going to go bung that castle. I'm going to kill all the women and children in that castle. Now, why would he do that? I mean, obviously, the answer is psychotic as an answer, but why? Can there be any reason why he would do this, as opposed to just going out and killing some other people? Why would he pick on Macduff's castle?
He's got
That's right. He's worried about Macduff, isn't he? He sees Macduff leaving and going away to England. I'm going to make Macduff pay for his treasonous behavior. Fair is foul and foul is fair. One of the obvious debates of 4-2 is going to be, why would Macduff leave? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? We'll obviously get to that later on as we move through this fourth act. All right, here we go. Go back to 4-1. Let's now watch as we and listen.
Thrice and once the head, speak wide. Happier cries, 'tis time, 'tis time. Round about the cauldron go, in the poisoned entrails, throat, toad, that under cold stone days and nights has 31 sweltered venom, sleeping god, boiled our first in the charming pot. Double, toil and trouble, fire, burn and cold and bubble. The little thin snake in the cauldron, boil and bake. Eye of gnat and toe of hog, wool of bat and tongue of dog, adder's fold and blindworm's sting, lizard's leg and howlet's wing, for a charm of powerful tongue, like a hell broth. Double, toil and trouble, fire, burn and cauldron bubble. Scale of dragon through the woods, which is money, ball and life of the rabbin salty shark. Root of hemlock digged in the dark, liver of blaspheming Jew, gall of goat and slips of yew slivered in the moon's eclipse, nose of Turk and Tartar's lips, finger of bat spangled babe, ditch delivered by a drab, make the gruel thick and slab, add that to a tiger's children for the ingredients of our cauldron. Double, toil and trouble, fire, burn and cauldron bubble. With the baboon's blood, then the charm is firm and gone.
Oh, well done, I commend your pains, and everyone shall share in the games. And now about the glorious scene, like elves and fairies in array, enchanting all that you put in.
Of my sons, something wicked this way comes. Open locks, whoever knocks.
How now, you secret black and midnight hags? What is to do?
A deed without a name.
I conjure you by that which you profess. Howe'er you come to know it, answer me. Though you untie the winds and let them fight against the churches, though the yeasty waves confound and swallow navigation up, though plated corn be lodged and trees blown down, though castles topple on their warders' heads, though palaces and pyramids do slope their heads to their foundations, though the treasure of nature's germans tumble all together even till destruction.
I don't care how bad it gets, I want to know the
answer me
truth.
to what I ask you.
Speak, demand. We'll answer. Say if thou'dst rather hear it from our mouths or from our masters.
Call them! Let me see them!
Pour in sow's blood that had eaten her 9 furrow grease, that sweating from the murderer's gibbets, throw into the flame. Come high or low, thyself and of his death they show. So.
Tell me, thou unknown power.
He knows thy thought, hear his speech, but say thou naught.
Macbeth. 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 Beware Macduff. Beware the thing of fire. Dismiss me. Enough. Whate'er thou art for thy good caution, thanks. Thou hast half my fear aright, but one word more.
He will not be commanded. There's another, more potent than the first.
Macbeth! Macbeth! Macbeth!
Had I 3 ears, I'd hear thee.
Be bloody, bold and resolute, laugh to scorn the power of man. For none of woman born shall harm Macbeth.
Then live, Macduff, what need I fear of thee? But yet I'll make assurance double sure, and take a bond of fate. Thou shalt not live, that I may tell pale-hearted fear it lies, and sleep in spite of thunder. What is this that rises like the issue of a king, and wears upon his baby brow the round and toughened sovereignty?
Listen, but speak not.
Be lion-mettled, proud, and take no care who chafes, who frets, or where conspirers are. Macbeth shall never vanquished be until great Birnam wood to high Dunsinane hill shall come against him.
That will never be! Who can impress the forest? Bid the tree unfix his earthbound rude. Sweet bodements, good! Rebellious head rise never till the wood of Birnam rise. And our high-placed Macbeth shall live the lease of nature, pay his breath to time and mortal custom. Yet my heart throbs to know one thing. Tell me, if your art can tell so much, shall Banquo's issue ever reign in this kingdom?
Seek to know no more.
I will be satisfied. Deny me this and an eternal curse fall on you. Let me know. Why sings that chord? And what noise is this?
Show his eyes. And grieve his heart. Come like shadows, so depart.
Thou art too like the spirit of Banquo. Down! Thy crown does sear mine eyeballs. And thy hair, thou art a gold-bound brow, is like the first. A third is like the former. Filthy hands, why do you show me this? A fourth, stout eyes. What? Will the line stretch out to the crack of doom? And I yet? A seventh? I'll see no more! And yet the eighth appears, who bears a glass which shows me many more. And some I see the twofold bowls and treble scepters carry. Horrible sight! Now I see 'tis true, for the blood-bolted Banquo smiles upon me and points at them for his. What is this so?
Aye, sir. All this is so.
But why stands Macbeth thus amazedly? Come, sisters, cheer we up his sprites, and show the best of our delights. I'll charm the air to give a sound, while you perform your antic round, that this great king may kindly say our duties did his welcome pay.
Where are they? Gone! Let this pernicious hour stand high accursed in the calendar. Come in, Without!
What your graces will.
Saw you the weird sisters?
No, my lord.
Came they not by you?
No, indeed, my lord.
Infected with the air were on their ride, and damned all those that trust them. I did hear the galloping of horse. Who was it came by?
'Tis 2 or 3, my lord, that bring you word Macduff is fled to England.
Fled to England!
Aye, my good lord.
Time, thou anticipatest my dread exploits. The flighty purpose never is o'ertook unless the deed go with it. From this moment, the very firstlings of my heart shall be the firstlings of my hand. And even now, to crown my thoughts with acts, be it fought and done. The castle of Macduff I will surprise, seize upon Fife, give to the edge of the sword his wife, his babes, and all unfortunate souls that trace him in his line. No boasting like a fool, this deed I'll do before this purpose cool. But no more sights. Where are these gentlemen? Come, bring me where they are!
It's one of the interesting questions of this play, and you can jot it down. We'll obviously discuss this later in more detail, but it runs something like this. How do you see Macbeth changing through the course of this play? Right? How do you see him, how do you see his, for lack of a better phrase, his evolution happening, right? And what is it that is the in the end, what's the highest, or we might call it the lowest point? At what point has he hit the lowest point? You could argue that it's now, right? You could argue that. All right, come back tomorrow and we'll watch what I will argue is one of the most provocative single scenes of the entire corpus canon of Shakespeare's work, 4-2.